Hello and welcome to my first ever video. This is my new channel I've just started, Exhumation Station, where we're going to exhume and investigate pretty much anything horror related, but most specifically books, especially my favorite genre, which is horror fiction, mostly of the vintage variety. I thought the best way to introduce myself would be like a lot of booktubers have done and complete the new booktuber tag. I got my list of questions by watching a similar video done by fellow booktuber to readers it may concern. So I'm just going to start at the top and work down this list and figure it'd be the best way for everyone out there to get to know me a little better. First question, why start the channel? I think the easiest way to answer that is because I have limited others in my life with whom I can talk about reading. We all know that not very many people read these days anymore, and especially horror and especially vintage horror. There are not very many people in a lot of our personal lives that we can talk to about it. So I'm starting this channel to be as a sort of outlet for me to talk about this genre and see where that takes us. And that leads me into the next question, which is, what am I the most excited about when it comes to this channel? I would say just that, like I stated previously, I'm excited to insert myself into a community of like-minded individuals and connect with others about what we like to read and just basically create that outlet for myself and to connect with others. The next question is, why do I love reading? And it's a simple question, but the more I think about it, I honestly think it's difficult to answer, at least for me, because reading has been a part of my life since basically the beginning of my life. My parents read to me when I was very young, as many parents do. And growing up, my mom especially, I always saw her reading. And I think I just assumed that's what adults did. That's just what people did. This was just what normal functioning members of society did, is they read. Our house was full of books. I thought every house was full of books. I just didn't know any different. And so I was kind of instilled with this love of reading without me even having to try. On top of that, I basically grew up in the library. My grandmother worked at our local library when I was a kid, and my mother would take us and we would pretty much spend all day at the library, participating in various programming activities. I would get to take books home. And so the summation of that is just reading has been a part of my life from the very beginning. But nowadays, as I'm much older and definitely still enjoy reading, I would say even enjoy it more than I ever have. And I think it's because it provides an escape, and specifically with vintage fiction or anything that is not recently published or maybe even set in an older time. It's an escape to when life was so much simpler. I think that's why so many millennials like me are attracted, have this attraction to nostalgia. And I think it's because it takes us back to a simpler time, before the internet, before cell phones, before social media, which it's funny, I'm talking about yearning for a simpler time while actively participating in social media. But I think you can understand that we all kind of yearn for that simpler time. And reading, not only the act of reading takes me back to that, it's an opportunity for complete disconnection and use of one's imagination. But on top of that, reading vintage fiction, I love, I'm really into stories right now set in the 1960s and 70s. I really don't know where that is coming from, but I wasn't even alive in the 1970s, but I just feel at home. It's a very cozy feeling when you read a book that is set in that time period when life was so much simpler. And that's a very specific answer, but that is what I am thoroughly enjoying about reading right now, is it's taking me back to a much simpler time, even a time I wasn't really participating in. Next question is, what got me into reading? I kind of just answered that with the previous question, which was my parents. Me getting into reading was a progressive result of being read to as a small child, basically being raised in the library, watching my mother read every single day, and again, just assuming that's what you did. And I remember I feel so basic saying this, but I got started in horror fiction with Stephen King. I know we all did. Boring. I'm not being very innovative with that idea, but there's no denying the fact that for a lot of us, I mean, he is the horror Shakespeare. It's not surprising that so many people got their start with him. But anyway, I did, because my mother read his books, had a quite impressive collection of his first edition hardcovers. She would buy them on publication day when they came out, a collection that I have now inherited. So I remember being a kid and kind of perusing my mom's book collection and being attracted to the covers, which is funny because the covers are what initially got me into vintage horror fiction, is that artwork. But I remember being intrigued by the covers, and most specifically the cover of her edition of Pet Sematary. That I immediately wanted to pick that up. And then I also remember her telling me how scary the book was, and I knew I had to read it. So yeah, I think, my family was very influential on me, and that's how I got into reading. Once I started being able to read on my own, of course, I got into Goosebumps. I don't know how that happened. I feel like all of us horror fans who were raised in the 90s were just kind of gifted Goosebumps. Like, I don't remember how it started or when it happened. I just remember loving it and reading the entire series. I owned the entire series. So that was probably my first dive into reading on my own. And then outside of horror, I read the Animorphs series, which I remember really enjoying. Not as much as Goosebumps, but I remember enjoying it. And then just picking up, random young adult novels from my school library. I would say the only thing I was really a diehard fan of was Goosebumps. And so yeah, that's how I got my start, and pretty much never looked back. And then as I developed my taste for horror and realized that that's what I enjoyed the most, then I of course started exploring more, learning about all the authors, and basically just devouring as much of it as I could. Next question is, who are my favorite booktubers and what questions would I ask them? I will fully admit I do not consume a lot of Booktube. I have maybe two, I'm not even exaggerating, 2 channels that I subscribe, watch everything these 2 people release. And that's part of the reason why I'm starting this channel, and I have an Instagram page as well. That's at Exhumation Station on Instagram. That's part of the reason I'm starting all of this, is to connect with others, because just doing a simple search for Booktube or Bookstagram, the ecosystem is inundated with so many options, and I find it a little overwhelming, which is funny because I'm just adding to the options now with the publication of this video. But I find it a little overwhelming, so I don't consume a lot of Booktube, and I definitely, my two favorites are horror focused. First of which is Cameron Chaney at Library Macabre. I've been watching him for years. We're pretty much the same age, but I remember like he was posting videos when he was very young, and I discovered him a long time ago. We have similar tastes, and it sounds weird because we've not ever met, but his content has been so influential and educational for me. So he is for sure a favorite. Another favorite, very close tie, is Samson at Night Nerves. I could be wrong, but I believe he is a newer addition to the BookTube community, but I am thoroughly impressed. I remember I somehow came across a video of his and watched it and immediately subscribed because I am impressed at, first of all, his production quality. Like, I'm sitting here recording into my phone. I know nothing about creating YouTube videos. I know nothing about video editing. And I feel like Samson at Night Nerves just out the gate produced this very polished, very professional, and impressive video. And I admire that. I'm not a creative person in a general sense. I'm just not very creative. So anyone who is able to not only be creative, but parlay that creativity into such a polished product, I really admire and I'm a little bit jealous of. And also, very quickly, I have watched all of his videos, I think, and again, like with Cameron, we have very similar tastes, and I am able to learn a lot, and most importantly, get recommendations of books I had not ever heard of. For example, one of the first videos from Night Nerves that I watched was a review of a novel called Maynard's House. He reviewed it positively, and so I immediately found a copy, read it, and loved it. Again, going back to that comment about books set in the 1970s, this one was that. And as soon as Samson at Night Nerves has such a nice way of not only summarizing the plot and telling you what it's about, but he's able to almost predict how it's going to make you feel. He's able to communicate the atmosphere that the author created in the novel. Samson is able to essentially tell you, okay, not only this is what the book is about, but this is how it feels. I hope that makes sense. But I had never heard of that novel, and I maybe would have not read it if it hadn't been for that video. So that's a very long answer, but those are my two favorites. What question? The main question, I don't really have any like questions specifically for them, but the main question I would ask them, or anyone who's been doing this for a while, is, do you ever worry about losing your joy of reading? Whatever happens with this channel, if I stop after this video, or if I do it for the rest of my life, I'm only going to read what I want to read. I'm only going to review what I want to review. I never want reading to become a chore and become something that I have to do, or forcing myself to read something I don't want to do because it's a trend on BookTube, or I'm feeling pressured in some way to read it. So the BookTubers out there who are successful, I would love to know how you protect that love of reading and the enjoyment of it, because I feel like I would be lost if I no longer got enjoyment from reading, if it became work. And the moment that it does become work, like if that is the result of doing this channel, I'm done, because I don't want to lose that. So that's probably the biggest question I would ask my two favorites, is how do you protect your enjoyment of reading? Next question, what are my challenges with starting a YouTube channel? Well, I have one very specific challenge, I am an American from the United States, but I am not currently in the United States. My full-time job is fully remote, and they do not care where I live. So I am currently spending time outside of the United States. And I learned very quickly that it is really hard to obtain horror media in almost any format outside of the United States. That's one thing us Americans do well, is we really like the spooky stuff. We really like Halloween. We really like horror. Where I am currently, it is not the case. Used bookstores are almost non-existent, outside from a couple kiosks that just have mostly children's books. If I want to purchase purchase a used paperback online, the shipping is astronomical. We all know that some of the prices of the books themselves are terrible, but then add on top of that $50 of shipping, for example, to get it from the United States to where I am, makes it definitely more difficult. I do have what I would think is an impressive Paperbacks from Hell collection. Right now, it's all in a storage unit in the United States. So I no longer have access to the probably $2,000 worth of vintage paperbacks I've spent. And I don't plan to be around them again for the foreseeable future. So that's probably my biggest challenge, is obtaining horror media. There is one Etsy seller, L'Entresort, in Paris or in France. I don't know where specifically in France, but she is in France. She is able to ship to me easier than most of the American or Canadian sellers. So I've been perusing her shop a lot recently. But yeah, that's probably my biggest challenge. It's not even about YouTube. It's just something that I've kind of been suffering with in silence for the last couple of years, which is it's really hard to obtain horror media. It's hard to watch horror movies. For example, right now, all the buzz I see on social media is about Clown in a Cornfield. It's not being released in my country where I am currently. I literally cannot watch it until it comes out on streaming. Thank God for VPN, and I can access, my home streaming services, but I have to wait, and a lot of times if there's a vintage title I want to read, I have to pray it's on Kindle, and I can buy the electronic version instead of paying $50 shipping for it to come to me. For example, I'm starting to dip my toes into the Fear Street series. Zero availability of that where I am. Luckily, Kindle has a random ones from the series. Like, they don't have the entire series, but they have random ones, so I'm able to read whatever is available there. But anyway, that's my biggest challenge, is obtaining horror media, and we'll just learn together, or you'll get to see firsthand how difficult it is. But I do have a small collection here with me. I couldn't resist buying, so I do have a small collection with me while I am away from home, and I will be happy to show you if interested. Another challenge with starting YouTube is, again, I'm not savvy when it comes to filming or editing. I'm filming on my phone right now. I don't even have a ring light. I don't have a tripod. I don't have a microphone. Literally talking to you through my AirPods right now. So if this is something I continue to enjoy doing, I'll invest some money, hopefully upgrade the quality. But for now, that I see that as a challenge, is I just need more experience with this. Next question, where do I read? The answer is anywhere. I definitely prefer physical books. I always have. I think I always will. I am a purist in that sense. I definitely prefer physical books. But I mentioned a little bit ago that I have a Kindle, and I just bought it recently. And the reason is because I travel a lot for work, for pleasure. I travel a lot. And packing, for example, if I'm going away for a week holiday, I'm going to need, and when I'm I'm talking about a holiday like a beach holiday where you're just gonna lay on the beach, get sun all day, and just relax. I'm gonna need at least 4 books for that week because I'm just gonna be reading constantly. I'm gonna be tanning and reading. Packing 4 books, especially if you're trying to do carry-on only, it takes up a lot of unnecessary space. And the Kindle has saved my life with that. I can load my Kindle up with a ton of books, more than I'll ever read on whatever trip I'm going on. And it takes up 0 space, and it weighs nothing. So while I do prefer physical books, and that's what I read mostly, my Kindle has made it so that I can read everywhere. I read if I'm at home. I live in the desert, so about 8 months of the year it is very, very hot. Really too hot to be outside. So like right now, for example, it's late spring. So I just lay on the couch and read, or I'll lay in bed and read. I know those aren't very exciting places, but I feel like a lot of you could relate to me. But then when the weather is a bit nicer, like in the winter time, I love to read outside. Again, the Kindle makes that a little easier to do, but I love to go to the park across the street from me, sit under a tree and read, and I will be content for hours. I love to be outside. I wouldn't say I'm outdoorsy. I don't like to camp or hike or any of that, but I like to take my book outside and sit in the sun. That's probably my favorite place to read, but I read anywhere. I always have a book or my Kindle with me whenever I'm leaving the house. So if I have a couple minutes downtime, I'll pick up my book and read. I know that with Kindle editions of books, you can read on your phone, and I've thought about doing that. Like that, just how easy would that be if you're in line somewhere, you just pick up your phone and resume reading. But it was a big enough jump for me to go from physical books to a Kindle. I really don't see myself reading on my phone. I don't see that happening. But it was a very long answer to the question of where do I read, and the answer is anywhere. Last question, what kind of books do I like? This channel, Exhumation Station, is going to be probably 97% horror focused. That is my genre of choice. That's what I grew up with. That is what I like to read. That's the easy answer to that question. However, I will read anything, and I go through phases of my life where what I'm reading changes. Horror is always there. Horror is like coming home. I'm always going to be reading that. But for example, a couple years ago, I got into this phase of really enjoying celebrity memoirs. So I read, I think at that time, Mariah Carey had released her memoir. I read that. I read Holly Madison's memoir about living in the Playboy Mansion for the time that she did. I read a few other celebrity memoirs. Of course, Jessica Simpson's, that one was very popular. So I wouldn't say I'm well read in that genre, but it was a very strange period of a year or two where I almost exclusively read celebrity memoirs. I also really enjoy historical fiction if it's done right. I don't want to feel like I'm being preached at. I don't want to feel like I'm reading a textbook. I don't want to feel like I'm in history class. But I discovered a love for historical fiction when I took an American history class at university, and they had us read Devil in the White City. And it's one of my favorite books I've ever read. If you haven't read it, which it's very popular, most of you have read it, but if you haven't, please check out Devil in the White City. That's a perfect example of the type of historical fiction I like. Well, there you have it. There is my new Booktuber tag video. Welcome everybody to this channel. I'm excited to grow it with everyone. I'm excited to meet new people, make new friends. Go ahead and give this video a like if you want to see more. Definitely subscribe, as I think I have one lonely subscriber right now. And also give me a follow on Instagram. Again, that is at Exhumation Station. Happy to chat with you on there as well. Bye guys, see you next time.